Thank you. All right, so we'll start the demonstrations, and I turn it over to Dave and John and Mike. So go to it.
Saw sharpening is not that difficult. You can start out, and I recommend you start out with a rip saw, because all you're going to do is work across. You not have to worry about fleam and slope. All you're going to worry about is rake. And if you've got a saw, the rake on this saw is already set, so I'm not going to bother. Okay, there's two types of Japanese style saws, really Japanese made, which can be sharpened, but they require special types of needle files to sharpen, or the kind that you'll see where you'll see typically a line along the middle of the teeth, which are impulse hardened, that's done electronically. Those are not sharpenable. They're so hard that they're actually as hard as or harder than your file. You're not going to get anywhere with that. The key thing is if you see halfway down or partway down the tooth, a dark line or a darker line, that pretty much tells you that the teeth are impulse hardened and it's a disposable saw blade. So basically you start out, you lay it in. This one works fine because it's only half the height.
So now this is all about carving chisels. So now that you understand that basic flat principle with carving chisels, using a grinder on these is difficult to impossible. I didn't mention the bevel that you tend to aim for is about a 30-degree bevel. It doesn't have to be precise, but the idea of 30 degrees is that when you're holding a chisel like this, it's like a knuckle of thickness back from where you're typically holding the chisel. So that's my 30 degrees, somewhere there. And if it's higher, you're taking more energy to push down into the wood. If it's lower, you can't get a bite. You have to hold the chisel so low like that, and then you end up with a very narrow front that will dull quickly. So 30 degrees, just like the sharpness test is your fingernail, the 30-degree test is knuckle in a comfortable position. That's about 30 degrees. Yeah. But for carving, you're using the traditional stones in a rather non-traditional way. To start with this technique, there's more metal along the sides than at the very bottom, typically of a gouge. So the technique is to come across and rotate the tool as I go. And then as I get up towards where the flat is, the edges, I can make a double stroke like that. Rotate it, double stroke.
You're not, do you have any metal contacts with a very tip of the tool?
Not yet. So the first step here is I'm going to round it over. But once we get far enough along in a somewhat sharper chisel, you'll slowly come up, and right when you're getting close to the final 30-degree point, that's when you want to stop and joint the face of the tool, as I described before. So in that case, since this was never sharpened, we could pretend we've rounded the back over. So again, the factory is just putting a simple bevel on it. So now to address the grind, the front of it, this is what also feels like heresy, is you're just dry. It's not a very pleasant sound either. And you go just far enough, a little bit more. Doesn't take a lot. You could do this on your medium or fine India stones or soft Arkansas real stones. So I'm using all oil stone terminology, but probably somebody could translate the equivalent in Waterstone. So I'm establishing, in this case, this ground, which is this position here, right straight down across the front. And I've done it enough now so that when you look at the face, the cutting face, the edge that we want to have down to 1 atom thin, you can see light reflecting back. So there's a flat face across the front of it now. It's really, you need to be in good light, and then you can see that there's light reflecting back.
Very sharp.
Yeah, so when you go all the way to something super sharp, like that one we were testing on fingernails before, you can't see any light reflecting off the tip, and then of course you have see this, it just slides right across your finger now. Yeah, it's just so you don't continually groove out your stone. You can always flip it around, go the other direction. So I'm still thinking of that 30-degree angle, which is, right, it's this again, your knuckle, how it fits comfortably in your hand, that's about a 30-degree angle. And as you get closer and closer, going across the stone like this, you'll start to raise a burr on the inside, which I can actually already feel on this. So need better light here. So the bottom is now sharp. The edges still need a little bit. So let me just dress those up. What I haven't done, and since I'm already done on the bottom piece, you can see when I come across here, I'm just very light pressure on that. So in the case of a carving gouge, it's helpful to have a set of slipstones. Thank you. Yeah, slipstones. I have some soft Arkansas ones, so these are equivalent to maybe a fine or probably closer to a medium India stone, but these are made from natural stone. These slipstones have, they come in different shapes. This one it's a fine stone, so it feels like glass actually. It comes to a pointed edge there, so that's great for a V chisel, like this V chisel here, where you can run it along the inside like that to take that burr off. But in this case, we want a small U profile, and this stone barely fits. Let's see, do I have a smaller? I don't have a smaller stone with me. You'd want a small collection of these. They're not so expensive, but this side is now done, theoretically. Pretend that I've rounded that over already. You now take your slipstone and just run it along, keeping it totally registered to the tool, to the inside face. So another problem that you see with establishing that flat is you can accidentally start to round over on the inside edge, and you'll lose the sharp edge of your tool. And you'll change, unfortunately, the whole profile of the front of the tool. So again, just doing this really lightly.
Only in one direction?
Only in one direction, yeah.
This is the way that I explain the important elements of sharpening. I guess you'd call this sharpening philosophy 101. And the first rule of sharpening, the most important rule, is rule number 1. Remove the minimum amount of metal. That's the most important thing. And that is supported by these two other concepts, the convenience and the accuracy of your system. Now, convenience is the antidote to sharpening procrastination. Sharpening procrastination is a problem that all beginners and intermediate woodworkers need to solve. The most important element in convenience is time.
In other words, if your sharpening method is so fast and so easy and so foolproof that it no longer is an issue, then sharpening procrastination melts away. So convenience is important. Accuracy is the repeatability of the jig. The repeatability of the jig allows you to take exactly 1/1000th of an inch of metal off the entire bevel to maintain the tool point geometry exactly the same as it was before. So with a good jig that maintains exactly the same angle every time automatically, without fuss and without fail, in a very convenient, fast system, then you can achieve this, rule number one, which is to remove the minimum amount of metal. So the process of sharpening anything involves 3 steps. The first step is the setup. The second step is the grinding, and the third step is the deburring. And you have to do all 3 things. So with this system, I got to put the other belt back on here. So the great thing about a belt system, as opposed to a wheel, is the ease of changing the grit. So you can go from coarse to fine or super fine, or it only takes 5 seconds to change the grit. Right? So here's a rough and gouge, a wood turner's rough and gouge. Some people think these are rather difficult to sharpen. All right, so you ready? All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's how long it takes to sharpen a chisel. It takes 7 seconds. And it really shouldn't take longer than that. Because if you're taking longer than that, you're probably grinding off more metal than you should be grinding and making more dust and grinding away an expensive tool and all these other things. So this is the very simple jig that works on turning chisels. And it works on any turning chisels that are between this length and this length. So it'll work on almost any bowl gouge, except for these Texas ones that are really long. Around 2010, I stopped making these machines. After making over 200 of these machines, I stopped doing it around 2010. And then Peter James kind of picked up where I left off, and he made some really serious improvements. And the biggest improvement that he made was that he eliminated the pegboard and developed this system. So on the surface, this might look just like a Wolverine. And it essentially, it starts out basically as a Wolverine. It's a pocket jig, right? It's a pocket jig for your turning chisels or everything. The problem that I had with this was that very short chisels like carving tools, they didn't reach all the way up here. So, there was no way to do that. Peter improved on this by making it incremental, right? So it can be locked into specific positions, just like the pegboard. Or you can put it in intermediate positions and lock it here. So it's the best of both worlds. It's continuous and incremental, and it can be used either way. But the other thing that's super important is this, right? So now if we got this, right, we got this in a certain position. When you raise and lower this, it accommodates different lengths of chisels. But raising and lowering this does not affect the angle, because this is parallel to that. So you're simply raising it up and down and not changing the angle. So, with this, you can accommodate, let me get this out here. This has to be right at the edge of the bench. So, right, with this, you can get pretty much any angle on your carving chisels by moving this up. Okay. And locking there. Or, your incremental here. Right. So this was a whole improvement. What other thing is it eliminated that board that's sticking out here, which was kind of always in the way. If it's on your bench, it's sticking out from the bench. So when you're done with this, you just push it in and it's completely out of the way. Do you know what this is? This is a VFD, a variable frequency drive. So, but this is a 3-phase motor. The speed and direction of it is controlled by this computer. So let's see how this works. Let Notice a soft start, which is programmable into the VFD, and I can select any speed that I want. Right? And you really have just really good control of this. All right, so you could get it going like that. And just, if you have really delicate carving chisel, if you put a 600 grit belt on here running at that speed, you can do just amazingly fine sharpening that way. But here's the most amazing thing. Boom. It's reversible. So now we have the best of both worlds. Well, why would you want that? Well, one reason you might want that is you might want to sharpen your scrapers on here, right? So if you're sharpening scrapers, you definitely want the belt to be going down, right? So that's where your reversing motor comes in. With the belt moving down, right, now we can do the scraper on the belt. And you really wouldn't want to do that with a belt going up because it would lift the tool off because of this angle. Right. So the lifting off is not a problem in a pocket jig, but it is a problem in a platform jig. All right, so the other question you're probably thinking is, well, wait a minute, how do you do this with a side grind jig? Now, personally, I don't use side grind. I don't really see the advantage of it. It just makes everything harder. Peter Block agrees with me. But I know that I'm in a minority here, so I'm going to address the question. Because most people today do use side grind. Maybe it's a fad that will go away. I don't know. It's made by One Way, and even though it's kind of expensive, it's a very popular kind of side grind jig. But you've got to put the chisel in here, and you got to clamp it down. And it has to project an exact amount from the jig. So that has to be measured one way or another. This is actually what Peter built in here. If you hold this against there and stick the chisel through until it hits that block, then you've got a consistent projection. So one of there's several ways that you can use it. Oh, I got to tell you about this. So you notice, so this tool made by One Way is called a vary grind. Well, why is it called that? Well, vary is like variable. Well, what is it that's variable? It's the angle of this leg is variable, right? So you can loosen this and you can move this to different positions. Now, I've talked to so many wood turners that use this, and I say, oh, why do you have that set there? And they say, well, that's where it was when I took it out of the box. Yeah. And then I say, well, what would happen if you moved it this way or that way? Nobody can answer that question. So I wonder if nobody actually moves this from, say, that 45 degrees, then maybe what you really want is this. I think David Ellsworth invented this. I actually simplified it even more. This is called a doghouse jig, right? So it's not a doghouse. But in most of these homemade ones, there's a screw on top that clamps the chisel. On mine, I made the leg the clamp. So the leg actually screws in and clamps the chisel. But so this is at 45 degrees, and this is probably enough. You don't really need to have that variability. This will allow you to put the leg into that as you rotate the chisel on this with a side grind chip. And the other thing, some people found that as you come around to the side, the jig actually hits the belt. And so what Peter devised was these side positions. So you have one position on this side and one position on this side so that you're actually swinging around to the side and you're not going to crash the belt. So yes, you can do side grinds on a belt as long as you kind of work off to the side. This is really very useful for doing small chisels like carving chisels. And I'll show you how I'll set this up. So with a carving chisel, you can't use the V-block, right? Because the chisel would be below the platen. All right, so I'm going to bring this up here like this. And, the angle of this doesn't matter, right? What matters is the distance away from the belt. So let's see. And you see how it's so much easier to set this than it is to set it to a wheel. And, the best way to check is to just strike. So you see how it's touching at the top. That means I need to move in a little bit. Whoops. So this is all that fussing and tuning in that I said I was trying to avoid. Okay, so now we have the position. And so to do a small carving chisel like this, you use this here, and you're basically doing the same thing, right? And then buffing. You can buff on both sides, but mostly you really just need to buff on the inside because that's where the burr comes up, right? And you know, this works great on carving chisels as long as you have a fine enough belt. I think this is a 280 or a 320. This is going to be kind of fun. So I don't know if you guys go to flea markets and buy old tools, right? And whether you're buying flat chisels or carving chisels or plain blades, you know, one of the things with old tools is the flattening of the back of the blade, which can be a difficult thing. So I've talked to students who have gone to woodworking schools, North Bennett Street School and other schools, and they say, well, how do they teach you to do that? Well, they say, well, they put the stone down on the bench and you rub it on the stone, right? And my question is simply, how long does that take?
Long time.
How long? How long?
Hour and a half for the first chisel I did.
Okay, but what if you had a blade this big?
Multiple.
Okay. Well, I'm going to show you how to do the back of a chisel like this, you know, in a minute or two. All right. So again, going back to this idea that what makes belts better than wheels. Oh, by the way, you know, you can never flatten something like this on a grinding wheel, can you? Not really. No. You might get the side of the wheel, but you know, that's always. So the beautiful thing about a belt is the ability to change the grit in a matter of seconds. So I don't know whether to go I'm going to go 60. Okay. So I'm going to go with 60. I also brought a 40. Well, let's just use the 60. Okay. Here we go. So I'm going to show you how to make a job that used to take 2 days, take 2 minutes. You know, and just to keep everything going well, I'm just going to keep alternating sides. Okay, I'm halfway there already. Now, having said that, overheating is not a problem. This is the only kind of job where you might need water. So I brought my own water here. This is the only type of job where I really need to cool something. Okay. All right, so far I've been grinding for about 15 seconds. Right, so I'm just going to keep alternating sides here. Now you can see that this blade has a little concave, and I don't know how it got that way, but all right. Yeah. So there's a line right there. And what is that? So this is where the hard steel has been laminated onto the steel back. So I probably should have started with a coarser belt, but I'm almost there.
Okay. All right. Welcome. My name is Lou Yelgin. I'm going to be showing how I use diamond stones to sharpen planes and chisels. I think in my intro I told you that my dad was he was a European trained woodworker, and he used oil stones, and that's what I grew up using. And I always hated using oil stones because of the smear that I would get all over my hands, and then you couldn't really wash it off well, and I didn't like the smell, and if you use kerosene, that smell too. So eventually, when I joined the guild and I started talking with other woodworkers, a lot of them were using Japanese Waterstones. So I bought a bunch of Waterstones, and I used that for probably 20 years. And they worked okay, except the problem with Waterstones is that they eventually gouge out. They're soft, and you have to flatten them. And I think I was using a plate of a glass plate with sandpaper, and I would, flatten them again and then use them, and then the internet came and YouTube came, and I was introduced to a British woodworker, Paul Sellers, who's my absolute favorite woodworker to watch on YouTube, and his sharpening system was basically 3 diamond stones. A coarse, a medium, and a fine, and that's what I ended up using. So these are my diamond stones. They're 2 sides. So this is the fine one. This is the more rough one, and I think they tell you what the grits are. I think it's 300, 600, 1,000, and maybe 1,200. And these are color coded and each color means something. Actually, it's written here. So, let's say, the green is 1,200, the red is 600, the blue is 325, and the black is 220. So basically there are 4 stones here, and you can just, this thing comes out, maybe it's on this side. Anyways, this thing comes out, and you reverse the stone. I typically have just been using, these 2 grits, the red and the blue. So we can start with this. Jigs. I should talk about jigs. So I started out using this jig by Veritas, and it worked okay. It's a nice broad roller here, so it stays pretty, stays on the stone pretty well. The neat thing about it is that it has a little knob on the side, and you can put a micro bevel on on whatever you're sharpening. So I have the arrow pointed up, and if you move it this way, it'll put a little micro bevel on it. So this is set to 25 degrees. So basically, if you come up to it like that, you kind of roll on up to it, and kind of when it stops, it's set. You tighten it and set it to what the angle is, and you can see. It's a little bit off, but this thing rotates. So if you wanted something to go to, 30, this is 35 degrees, this is 30 degrees. So you would just rotate it, then you'd roll up to it, adjust the knob, and set it to 30 degrees. So I used to obsess about this, and I found that I wasn't sharpening my tools because I'd be in the middle of a project, and I would I don't want to take 10 minutes off to get the jig out, to set it into the jig, to make sure the angle was right. And then, so right now I'm using the Paul Sellers method, which is I do it freehand. And I was determined that I was going to train myself to just do it freehand. And so that's what I do now. I don't, it's not perfect, but it does sharpen it, and it's quick. And then I can get to the project that I'm doing. So, but the jigs are nice. They're very well made. So this is the Veritas jig. It's probably $50. I don't know, 10 years ago, I bought I bought their latest jig, which is really neat because it allows you to set the angle, easier. So here you would just take the blade, and let's see if I can do this right. The blade goes in like this. Oh, am I doing this right? Yeah. You can tell I do not use this much. So I have this set to 25 degrees. You take the blade, you put it in here, you move it up to the stop, and then you adjust the clamp down. So, and the neat thing about this is that it sets it so it's perfectly perpendicular. You know, then you would take this thing off and then go to your stone and, you know, and start sharpening. It works really well. It just takes time. So I'm tending not to, in my current state, I tend not to use jigs, and I'm trying to get better at freehand sharpening, but that's just me. So let's see, diamond stones. So the process for sharpening on diamond stones would be I have a little spritz bottle with some water in it. Some people use automotive Windex. They say that's better. I just use water.
What?
Automotive Windex. Yeah, it's. I guess it doesn't have all the chemicals that.
Ammonia.
Yeah, that's probably it. So the process would be, I just spritz a little bit on. This blade is in pretty good shape. So what I would do first would be make sure the back was flat. So I would just run it back and forth here. You know, there's something called the ruler trick, which was invented by a British woodworker, David Charlesworth, where you don't need the entire back of the blade flat. You just need the first to maybe 1/16 of an inch flat on the back. So what he does, he has since passed away. Unfortunately, he was quite young. But anyways, he's passed away. But he invented this or promoted this ruler trick. So you put the ruler here. That lifts the blade slightly off the stone in the back, so now the force of the sharpening is just going to be on the front of the blade, and you just go back and forth like that, and that will tend to just put a flat, just behind the cutting edge. See if it's working. Yeah, it's doing it. Now this is not that the blade has some pits on it because it's old. It's 100 years old, but it's a laminated steel blade. It takes a nice edge. So you can see it's putting a flat right, probably an eighth of an inch.
Could you call that a back bevel?
Yeah, I think that's what they call it, a back bevel. So, diamond stones are neat because they stay flat. They sharpen really well. You've got multiple grits to choose from, and it's usually pretty quick. There's also these things that I made because I saw a guy from Britain on the internet, and he was actually selling these. But basically, it's a little block. He sells them in brass. I stole his idea, but anyways, so this is 20 degrees. There's a magnet in the back. There's a little level on the front, and basically that would go on the blade like this, or is it like this? I think, yeah, it'd be like this. So this is just a tool to help, maybe to make sure you're at the 20 degrees, and you kind of focus on putting this in the middle as you're sharpening. So I thought that was pretty neat. Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to go through all that, you could just you could use one of these jigs. So this was 25 degrees. So once I saw that there was a new edge established all the way across, not there yet.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have started on something on a more aggressive stone.
They're very aggressive.
We do that.
Different grits. Right.
Yeah, so this is blue. So blue is 325. Oh, I forgot to tell you about this thing. All right, I'll tell you about that in a sec. So this is much more aggressive. So that's taking off more metal. Now, I should have also shown you. There's another jig that you can make. So if you didn't want to use this thing, there's an article on the Lee Nielsen website about this, and various other people who do sharpening on YouTube will show you how to make this. So basically, it's a set of stops. Well, I mean, once I'm done with this one, I'll go to the strop, which is a piece of leather, and the green dialogues. Oh, this goes up. I think it's 1,200. Yeah. So this is 1,200. And let's see. Am I making progress? Almost there.
When you're sharpening by hand, the Paul Sellers technique, do you do a micro bevel, or you just do?
Oh no, I haven't been. I just get it to where it looks sharp, and it's not perfect, but it allows me to get to my work quicker.
Back in the plan and you work.
Yeah. So I mean, Paul Sellers has been doing it for 50 years. And he's fantastic. I'm not Paul Sellers, so I'm trying to get better at doing it freehand.
Is there any maintenance to the diamonds now?
I just wash them. Just wash the crud off. So no. I mean, these are our Duo Sharp. There are other companies. Dave mentioned the other company that DMT. Yeah. So I don't know either one. I'm trying to remember what I spent. I don't know. They're not cheap. This says maybe $70 a stone or more, depending on the brand. But yeah, it's a lifetime thing. So I'm still a little bit off here. So maybe as I'm off on this corner, and probably I'm putting more pressure here. So I might try to put more pressure here on. To get that to even out.
Do you use the honing guide, the strop rather than the honing guide?
No, I've tended to do that freehand. Yeah, I suppose you could. But usually it's just a few strokes, and then I'll show you the diamond paste that I use also. If you want to put a mirror finish on it. So I'm getting there. Let's see if I can get it.
So would you use anything besides water?
Just water. Again, a good stance, right? Get your hands in the right place, trying to pull that bevel, and things aren't clamped down as well as they should be, and the table is moving, so I'm not in ideal conditions. But you get the concept, right?
Yeah, I would make a table.
Well, this is part of the whole sharpening fetish. You can go overboard with these things to the point that it's trying to get a sharp edge, right?
Prefer that over just a grinding wheel?
Excuse me?
Prefer that over a grinding wheel?
Yeah, because we're trying to get too straight. A grinding wheel is going to give us concave.
Okay, more of a hollow grind.
A hollow grind. We don't want a hollow grind for a carving axe. We want two straight, like two chisels back to back,
All right.
with no belly, no curve to them. None of this or that. We want to have it two parallel edges. So when you're chopping, it goes in nice and easy, and it pulls out nice and easy.
20 degrees?
I don't think the number is that important, but yes.
No, but I'm just saying,
About
you
20.
know what works nice for you.
About 20. We'll see what this is. 23 degrees. About.
The included, right?
Yes, the included that.
Sweet.
Right. This is a coarse diamond, so you could take it to the next step and go finer.
You don't do the arc like Mike was doing with the carving tool?
It's hard to do.
Yeah.
It does. You can see it rocking back and forth. So I am doing it, but it's hard to keep that
Oh, yeah.
quite right.
That looks great. Okay.
And like anything, if you do this for more than 15 minutes, you're going to get better at it, right?
Yeah. Muscle memory.
Exactly.